From the headquarters of Telestio English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South, and I am Soini Gray. A group of Venezuelan migrants will return home from Ecuador on Wednesday night. So far, 185 people have returned from Brazil and 89 from Peru. More Venezuelans are expected to return thanks to the Return to the Homeland program. Another plane is expected to arrive in Caracas from Peru on Saturday and from Argentina on Monday. Venezuelan migrants in Ecuador have denounced xenophobia and the poor living conditions. Many of them are ready to go back home.
A makeshift camp to the north of Quito currently houses nearly 50 Venezuelan migrants. This number varies, and many of those here wish to return home. They can't find work and living conditions are poor. The idea of a better life for them outside of Venezuela, an idea sold by the mainstream media, has turned out to be a lie for many.
This is why we have decided to return home, to fight and move forward in Venezuela.
Their situation becomes more complicated when there are children involved. Eneida arrived at this camp 10 days ago. She traveled with her 5-year-old daughter, leaving the rest of her children back in Venezuela.
I have children back home. I can't stay here in these conditions. I brought my little girl because she's the youngest, but having her here is too difficult.
Sadly, xenophobia is a real issue in a country that's supposed to have its doors open for migrants.
There's a constant media bombardment against migrants, which paints Venezuelans as people who are coming to take something away from Ecuadorians.
Ecuadorian society has started to react to the false idea that unemployment, poverty, and other social ills are caused by Venezuelan migrants. And yet, intolerance is being fought by Ecuadorians who recognize xenophobia.
We are defending the freedom of mobility for all people. We are all related, regardless of where we come from.
As many start to defend the rights of Venezuelans to freely move through the country, many of the migrants are ready to return home. In the next few hours, a plane will arrive in Quito to repatriate nearly 100 Venezuelans as part of President Nicolás Maduro's Return to the Homeland plan.
Our correspondent Denise Herrera has more from Quito.
Hello, yes, indeed, around 86 Venezuelan citizens will leave Ecuador today as part of the government's Return to Homeland plan. This decision was taken after several allegations of xenophobia and discrimination and sexual exploitation and labor exploitation were denounced in different countries around the region as Peru, Bolivia, Colombia, and also now here in Ecuador. So this decision was taken after this allegation, and also Ecuadorian social organizations have rejected these measures and this situation about the flow of migrants. They say that this is part of a strategy against the Venezuela government. So this airplane will leave today at 6 p.m. here in Ecuador and will come back to Venezuela. That is all we have for now. Back to you at the studio.
Thanks for that, Denise. Now, Venezuela has condemned the meeting that took place in Ecuador's capital, Quito, to discuss the situation of Venezuelan migrants. Vice President Delcy Rodriguez has said this has fueled xenophobic attacks against Venezuelans.
We express our concern and rejection of any kind of biased and political manipulation with the immigration issue of Venezuela, as we have already denounced with verified and specific numbers. Today, a failed meeting took place in Quito with governments of the Lima Group. In that meeting, they deliberated over aspects that have nothing to do with the reality of Venezuelan voluntary migratory flows. Venezuelans that each time they gather outside of our embassies to ask for the return to Venezuela. In addition, the President of the Republic has asked that the Foreign Minister immediately present a formal protest through diplomatic means to this meeting that promotes a campaign of xenophobia against Venezuelans, promoting campaigns that denigrate and attack the integrity of Venezuelans. The state will be firm in defending our people around the world.
The two-day meeting called for increased funding to cope with migrants from Venezuela. The final declaration referred to the humanitarian crisis driving the migration. Members of the People's Solidarity Committee in Ecuador protested the meeting. They say it was aimed at promoting foreign intervention in Venezuela.
We want to show this is an attempt to promote a military intervention. They presented this as humanitarian intervention to invade Venezuela, to take its oil and to destroy its political process and its sovereignty.
And the Organization of American States is holding an extraordinary meeting to discuss Venezuela. Venezuela says this is just a new attempt to intervene in their country. Representatives from the International Organization for Migration and the UN High Commissioner for Refugees are also expected to meet.
We also here today need to...
Dozens of migrants have lined up outside the Venezuelan embassy in Peru to apply for the Return to the Homeland program. Our correspondent in Lima, Jaime Herrera, has more details.
People keep lining up outside the Venezuelan embassy headquarters in Lima. These Venezuelan migrants want to apply for the Return to Your Homeland program. They have different reasons to get back home. For instance, many say they have suffered xenophobia, poor work conditions. They've even been victims of human trafficking. Now they need to do an interview in order to be selected for the different flights organized by the Venezuelan government. Meanwhile, more and more people continue to arrive here to apply.
Guatemala has banned the head of the Commission Against Impunity, Ivan Velasquez, from entering the country. President Jimmy Morales expelled the UN mission over the weekend. According to Morales, the head of the commission is, quote, a threat to national security. The decision to expel the Commission Against Impunity has sparked protests. Social organizations have criticized the president for trying to derail the corruption investigation of his affairs. Our correspondent in Guatemala City, Mauricio Rosales, has more in this report.
The Guatemalan government is facing political repercussions because the president, Jimmy Morales, denied entrance to the country to Ivan Velázquez, head of the International Commission Against Impunity. The political storm started on Friday when Morales decided not to renew the ruling of the commission. Now, immigration services are under instructions to not allow the entrance of Velázquez through any route. This latest decision has led to requests of safe harbor for Velázquez. Lawmakers believe that President Morales is breaking constitutional law with this ruling. The court last year ruled that the commission could work in the country and demanded Morales stop acting against both the commission and Velázquez. The debate has turned to whether the president is disobeying a direct order from the Constitutional Court, which is considered a crime in Guatemala. The Constitutional Court must now decide if they will allow another protection order for Velázquez and the Commission.
Thank you, Mauricio Rosales. The public prosecutor of Sao Paulo has accused the vice presidential candidate, Fernando Haddad, of corruption. He is being accused of bribery while being the mayor of Sao Paulo. But Haddad has denied any wrongdoing. The Workers' Party says this is part of a political persecution campaign against their candidates. And time now for a short break. We'll have more news in a minute.
An occasion to enjoy the cultural diversity that defines our South American essence. Come along to find out the story behind these personalities, traditions, and artistic expressions that unite us as a whole. Real Lives. Saturdays, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. Argentina says it hopes the International Monetary Fund will agree to an improved bailout loan in the second half of September. The Argentine Finance Minister, Nicolas Jovne, met the head of the IMF, Christine Lagarde, in Washington on Tuesday. They were expected to talk about the new conditions for the fund to speed up payments on a $50 billion deal, but Jovne was unable to provide many details. And President Mauricio Macri has been accused of abuse of power over the agreement he signed with the IMF. Macri and his ministers are accused of violating the Constitution by not seeking congressional approval for the loan. The state prosecutor presented the case in court and said that it's now up to the judiciary to rule if it suspends the agreement with the IMF. President Macri, meanwhile, says he's confident his plan will stabilize Argentina's economy.
I'm clear about the way to get out of this storm and stabilize the macroeconomy. We're working on that. Approve a balanced budget, add a new agreement with the IMF, and with the sum of those two things, put the certainty of the financial program of the Argentine state in 2019. Then we have to retake external funding to resume the path of investment that we had strongly started in 2017. That's the only way. We don't have another one.
And the purchasing powers of retirees in Argentina has dropped 30% since President Mauricio Macri took office in 2015. A report of the National University of Avellaneda found the austerity measures and the currency devaluation could be responsible. Retirees are now earning around $150, close to what they earned during the economic crisis of 2001. And dialogue has begun in Honduras to resolve last year's controversial presidential election. The talks are beginning after 9 months of failed attempts. United Nations representative Igor Garafulik said each side is equipped with delegates committed to international mediation. Each committee is expected to present solutions at the end of the dialogue period. The Venezuelan government fuel protection plan has started along the border with Colombia. New devices are being used to make sure that fuel is no longer being stolen.
Across the Venezuelan border with Colombia, a new device is being installed in gas stations. This is so that citizens can securely fuel their cars with subsidized petrol. The device recognizes a person's fingerprint to make sure they have registered for the subsidy.
Let's hope this works, and that it works quickly.
This is one of 315 gas stations that will be using the new system. There's still some confusion as to how it will work, but it will be rolled out over the next 2 weeks. Citizens must provide their homeland card and then place their fingerprint on the device so workers know they are eligible for the subsidized prices. If it's the first time, the client doesn't pay anything.
It is good that they have implemented the system on the border. It will reduce lines that were eternal before. We will be saving a lot of time.
In the country with the world's cheapest fuel, which sells for less than a cent of a dollar per litre, contraband is a huge issue. Neighbouring countries steal nearly $10 million worth of fuel every year. Do you think this system will put an end to fuel smuggling?
I surely hope so. Smuggling has cost this country too much.
With the new measure, the government hopes to put an end to fuel smuggling, particularly in the border town of Táchira, where 70% of the contraband heading to Colombia leaves the country.
I think this could work, but it will be difficult.
All Venezuelans have the right to subscribe to the new subsidy program. Whoever refuses to subscribe before October will have to pay international prices for fuel.
Students at the National Autonomous University of Mexico are striking after violent groups attacked them on Monday. 2 people were seriously injured during a peaceful demonstration. Students are now demanding that the university ensures their safety on campus. So far, 18 members belonging to these groups have been expelled from the university. The demonstrations are occurring as the 50th anniversary of the Tlatelolco student massacre approaches. On October 1968, a student demonstration was violently suppressed. leaving around 400 people dead, and over 1,300 protesters were arrested. The president of Costa Rica, Carlos Alvarado, has agreed to meet with union leaders as long as they cancel their strike. Unions are planning an indefinite general strike to begin on Monday. Alvarado asked for their support for a plan seeking to strengthen public finances. Unions had previously asked Alvarado to meet with them on September 10th to discuss their demands. Trinidad and Tobago's education minister is threatening teachers with legal action if they take part in Friday's national strike. Multiple unions are banding together to protest increasing job losses and stagnant wages in the country. However, Education Minister Anthony Garcia says teachers are considered an essential service. Therefore, they're prohibited from taking industrial action.
Section 69 of the Industrial Relations Act prohibits members of the teaching service from taking part in industrial action. Any member of the teaching service who takes part in industrial action in contravention of Section 69 of the Act is liable on summary conviction to a fine of $500 and to imprisonment for 3 months.
And now the unions are planning countersuits if the government takes action against any worker who joins the strike. The leader of the country's largest union says workers are within their rights if they simply take a sick day. The unions have a meeting with the Prime Minister on Thursday to possibly stave off the strike.
We will not hesitate to bring you before the magistrate court or any single permanent secretary or any single head of department or anyone who is acting on behalf of the employer who believe they can jail, fine, or penalize anyone for taking 1 day sick leave. As a matter of fact, the law is clear. You do not have to supply a medical paper or give any evidence that you were sick if you take 1 day off.
And Guyana's teacher strike moves into its 3rd day. Since Monday, students have been turned away as teachers fail to show up for classes. Teachers again gathered in front of the Education Ministry to continue protest action. They're asking for a 40% wage increase, which the government says is too expensive to pay. And teachers and students in Sint Maarten returned to school 1 year after Hurricane Irma wreaked havoc on the island. But all isn't normal. There are significantly less students as many families left the island after Irma. Meanwhile, the teachers' union is threatening a strike action. The union is worried classrooms aren't physically ready for the new student intake. 20 schools were badly damaged and 3 of them were entirely destroyed. Bolivia's President Evo Morales has said the country will have a new universal healthcare system by 2019. This new system will provide free medical care for every citizen. The National Treasury will fund the insurance plan. This initiative comes after an extensive debate with social movements, institutions, and health sector. Almost 2 years after signing a peace accord between the Colombian government and the FARC, Cuba has pledged 1,000 medical scholarships to underprivileged Colombians, including former FARC members.
A second group of medical scholarship beneficiaries were seen off Tuesday by several officials, including FARC President Rodrigo Londoño, to fulfill an offer from the Cuban government, which was initially made during the Colombian peace talks.
It is a gesture for the construction of peace in Colombia. The Cuban government granted young Colombians 1,000 scholarships, 500 for the FARC and 500 for the government. We are now sending off the second contingent of 147 to join the 186 who are already there.
According to the Cuban embassy, the scholarships are granted to former combatants and any Colombian young person from deprived backgrounds.
The students come from different social backgrounds. There are 22 former combatants, 13 indigenous people, Afro-Colombian students, young people from social movements, young people coming from zones affected by conflict, children of former military officials, and a former police officer.
For Haiti, a former FARC combatant for 17 years and a victim of the armed conflict as a child, studying medicine is not only a personal achievement, but also a step forward for the Colombian people.
I like the social work. I am going to study medicine because there is a big health problem in Colombia. The FARC has the same objective of working for society. We are going to study not for personal gain, but to come back to Colombia and say, come here. There are a lot of people here who need health care.
Mauricio, one of the victims of the armed conflict, says the peace accord enables the building of a new country and calls on President Duque to support the peace process.
I represent the Colombian countryside, where the state comes with glyphosate. I prefer this peace process that saves lives and enables us to be physicians, to help people. President Duque, peace is not made with glyphosate, but by protecting lives, this is what the peace process means.
Next Friday, family members of former military officials, a police officer, along with others, will travel to Cuba to fulfill their dreams of becoming doctors.
The Congress in Chile has approved the gender identity law. The bill was passed with 26 votes. The new law allows trans people older than 14 years old to change their name and gender on their IDs. Trans people will also be recognized by their chosen gender in public and private institutions. President Sebastian Pinera will have to approve within the next 30 days. Activists say this is a bittersweet conquer as it does not recognize the rights of trans children. And the LGBTI community in Guatemala has protested outside Congress against a bill to forbid same-sex marriage. The proposed bill also defines a family as being limited to father, mother, and children. Activists say the law could discriminate against the queer community if passed. Congress is also currently discussing a bill that could approve jail sentences of up to 4 years for women who suffered miscarriages. This could also increase punishments for those undergoing an abortion. Well, we've reached the second break of the show. We'll news in a bit.
Our actions have an impact on the environment. It's our responsibility to change for the sake of our planet. Let's be part of this transition. Watch, preserve, and protect your Green Zone. Wednesdays, only on Telesur. Telesur brings you special interviews with social and political personalities. Monday, from Washington. Tuesday, from Mexico. Wednesday, from Caracas. Thursday, from Quito. Friday, from Havana. Analysis about our continent's reality. Weekdays, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. Members of Parliament in Zimbabwe have been sworn in. This has come 2 weeks after President Emmerson Mnangagwa took office. 250 legislators took oath. The Speaker of the National Assembly, the Senate President, and its deputies are expected to be elected. President Mnangagwa is expected to officially open the first session of the 9th Parliament to provide the legislative agenda. Tunisia has increased fuel prices for the 4th time this year. The International Monetary Fund has been pressing Tunisia to trim its budget deficit and increase fuel and electricity bills. The government said this will help to reduce the budget deficit, but consumers say the cost of fuel is rising beyond their reach.
This is unacceptable. Our earnings have been reduced because we are working to pay for expensive fuel. The state is responsible for this chaotic situation.
And now let's take a look at some of the other stories making headline across the world.
150 people were held at Perpignan airport in the south of France after flying in from Oran, Algeria. There were fears a child on board was suffering from cholera. According to Algerian health authorities, there have been more than 60 confirmed cases of cholera this month. Hundreds of Syrian refugees made their way back to their homes from Lebanon on Tuesday. Busloads of people were taken to Homs, Damascus and Hama provinces. One passenger said that he's been away from his home for 7 to 8 years.
My name is Israel Safadi. I am returning to my country. I am very happy. I spent 6 years here and I'm very glad that I am coming back to my country again.
At least 3 protesters were killed in the city of Basra in Iraq as mourners attended the funeral of 26-year-old activist who was killed at a demonstration the day before. According to official reports, the violence broke out during the funeral as people threw stones at the Iraqi forces who responded with tear gas and live ammunition. Typhoon Jebi in Japan has killed 10 people. It's the most powerful storm the country has faced in decades. An airport company had to transport around 3,000 stranded travellers by boats due to flooding. It's not known when the airport will reopen. Some roads and train lines remain closed.
And we've come to the end of this news brief. For these and many other stories, you can find them on our website at talisyourtv.net/English. You can also join us on social media. We are on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. For Tell Us Your English, I'm Suni Gray. Thank you for watching.
Me gustaría tener un mundo mucho más inclusivo para todos.
没有贫穷。
Sin anthropos está